Hey everybody, this is the fourth here, and in this video, I just wanted to give you some tips to help you get the most out of the information of this section of the tutorial, specifically regarding your phase relations of your different sounds. So the first tip is that bass matters most. Phasing problems will be much more apparent in the bass and the low-mid range than in the higher frequencies. So focus on the bass first. You really want your kick and your bass and your snare, if the kick plays at the same time as the snare. You want all of those sounds to really have a great phase relationship, because if they don't, it can cause some issues and just lose a lot of the punch or the power in the track. So really, the bass matters most. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be concerned about any phasing issues in the high end. It's just that it's really, really important in the bass. And the second tip I have here is don't obsess. If your phase relations are problematic, it's going to be pretty obvious. You will hear that your snare disappears when your kick hits, or you'll hear any kind of phase cancellation. You should be able to hear it pretty well. So if you don't notice any problems, if you don't notice any sounds sounding weird or being cancelled out, you are probably fine in regards to your phase relations. Anything more specific than that is just to enhance the mix a little bit and get the phase relationships ideal. And you're never going to have perfect phase relationships. There's always going to be some amount of phase cancellation going on somewhere in your mix, and the majority of the time, it's not going to cause a problem, so you don't have to obsess and really analyze the different waveforms. Just if you notice anything, and it should be pretty obvious if it's a problem, then that's what you want to fix, and not really worry about anything too obscure or anything like that. Now, the next tip I have for you here is to always try inverting the polarity. So, whenever I bring a new sound into the mix, when I raise that level fader up from 0, I will check out how it sounds in the mix with that inverted polarity turned on. And I'll toggle it between on and off and listen to the whole mix and pay attention to how that sound fits in the mix with the inversion on and with it off, and then decide which way sounds better to me. And this definitely isn't something that you have to do, but it's so easy to do, and it can really change the character of the sound within the mix and help it sit better in the mix, or help it stand out more, or whatever you're going for. It's so easy to do, it's just worth trying that out. So just try it out when you bring a sound in, see how it sounds with the polarity inverted, and compare that to how it sounds normally, and decide what sounds best to you. Now, my next tip is to pay attention to latency. If you've set up your phases perfectly and you've been really kind of particular about how the phases of certain sounds relate to each other in the mix, these phase relationships can be messed up and made no longer ideal by certain plugins causing latency on one of the tracks and not the other tracks. And like I said in a previous part of this tutorial, these very slight timing adjustments can change the phase relationships and the character of layers in a mix. And so this latency is just going to cause that change. And if you've been really particular, it's not going to sound how you like it to sound anymore. And so you just want to pay attention to any latency and make sure that you're not adding latency, or that you fix it if you do add it by using a certain plugin on a certain sound. And the last tip that I have for you kind of ties in with the previous tip. And that is that you should perfect your phase adjustments after using EQ and other effects. And this really does go along with the previous tip, because adding certain effects will add that latency, and using an EQ will change the phases of certain frequencies of a sound. And any kinds of effects might change something about the sound. So if you've perfected your phase relationships before doing any effects, they might no longer be ideal. And in my experience, usually this isn't a problem. Usually it's not very noticeable. And unless you're being very, very particular about your phase relationships, it's not going to really be a problem. But this is something worth considering, especially if you want to really be particular about your phases.